Snatched in the Night, the enduring legacy of Eve Carson. Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a really close look at a tragedy that absolutely shook the University of North Carolina to its core back in 2008. By walking through the timeline, the trail of evidence, and the legal proceedings, we're going to understand not just what happened on that awful night, but more importantly, the incredibly bright light that the world lost.
Section 1. The Leader of Carolina, Eve Carson's Impact. Before we even touch on the crime itself, we really have to start with the victim, Eve.
This year will be a year of growth and inclusion. This quote just perfectly captures who she was. When she was sworn in as the newly elected student body president, she stood right in front of her peers and made it absolutely clear that her term was going to be about bringing people together. She wanted every single student to get involved and give back.
To put her drive into perspective, Eve was a 22-year-old rising senior from Athens, Georgia, and her resume was, well, it was staggering. She was pre-med, double majoring in political science and biology. She won the prestigious Morehead Scholarship, was in the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society, and somehow still found the time to spend her summers volunteering across Ecuador, Egypt, and Ghana. She was just an inquisitive, deeply caring young woman who genuinely wanted to make the world a better place, and she was putting in the hard work to actually do it.
Section 2. Timeline of a Tragedy. March 5, 2008. The contrast between her quiet evening and the sudden violence that followed is just stark. Look at how fast this all happened. At 1:30 a.m., Eve opted out of going out with her roommate so she could stay home and study. Then, at 3:30 a.m., an eyewitness named Harper saw two men lurking near a dumpster outside and was actually spooked enough to drive away. Just 7 minutes later, at 3:37 a.m., Eve's laptop registered its very last activity. By 3:55 a.m., someone was already pulling cash from her bank account. When her roommate Justin finally got back at 4:30 a.m., the lights were on, the door was wide open, but Eve and her 2005 Toyota Highlander were gone.
5 hours, 8 minutes, and 14 seconds a.m. That exact timestamp is when 911 dispatchers started getting reports of multiple gunshots and a female scream. It all culminated in police finding a young, initially unidentified woman right in the middle of a quiet intersection about a mile from her house. She had been shot multiple times, and because she didn't have her ID on her, it actually took hours before her roommate, who had gone to the station to report her missing, had to do the unimaginable and identify her.
Section 3. A Trail of Evidence. The ATM Spree. Instead of fading into the shadows, the perpetrators immediately started leaving a digital trail.
It's honestly baffling how brazen they were. They didn't even try to lay low. First, they maxed out her withdrawal limit, taking $700 just minutes after abducting her. Then, shockingly, just 20 minutes before 911 was even called for the gunshots, they were at a totally different ATM over in Durham trying to get more cash. And they just kept trying. The next day and the day after that, hitting up local mini-marts until the bank finally blocked the cards. When police put out the CCTV images showing a young man in a vintage Houston Astros hat driving Eve's car, they brought in a photography expert named William E. Mathesay to look at the grainy black and white ATM footage. By enhancing the image, he found something chilling, a dark shadow in the back of the car. It was another person sitting just out of view. Someone was in the back, presumably with Eve, while the driver used the machine. This confirmed they were hunting for two suspects, not one. 200. Driven by a $25,000 reward offered by the university trustees, a completely devastated but determined community flooded Crime Stoppers with over 200 calls in a matter of days. That sheer outrage turned into swift action, and those tips pointed law enforcement directly toward two specific names.
Section 4. Capturing the Killers, Systemic Flaws. Now let's take a hard look at the two individuals the public identified, because their backgrounds expose some pretty severe systemic failures in the justice system.
First, we have 21-year-old Demario Atwater. He had a rap sheet that included robbery and assault, and he'd actually been arrested just 2 weeks prior for carrying a gun while on probation. The only reason he was on the streets that night was because of a simple courtroom scheduling error that delayed his hearing. And then there's 17-year-old Lawrence Lovett Jr. Shockingly, he was also on probation and had already been charged with the murder of a Duke graduate student earlier that very same year. But because of massive supervision failures, he was out too.
A tip from an acquaintance named Jason McNeil blew the case wide open after Lovett actually asked him for a ride to skip town. Police then used cell tower pings to place Lovett right by Eve's house, and his DNA was recovered from her SUV. And this is the hardest part to process. In his own confession, Lovett admitted they watched her get into her car, they ambushed her, and despite her being incredibly calm, offering them literally anything they wanted, even asking to pray with them, they shot her, simply because she had seen their faces.
Section 5. Justice for Eve. The Legal Outcomes. So let's look at how the legal system responded to a crime of this magnitude.
I'm not the monster that you made me out to be. If it means anything to anybody, it means something to me. That was the statement Lawrence Lovett Jr. made in court. He tried to claim that people make mistakes, but given the cold-blooded nature of what he did and his ties to his second murder, the judge was entirely unmoved, explicitly stating there was no chance he could be rehabilitated. So both men were permanently removed from society. Demario Atwater pled guilty in May 2010 to both federal and state charges, specifically to avoid the death penalty. He received life in prison without parole, plus an additional 23 to 29 years. Since Lovett was a minor at the time of the crime, the death penalty wasn't on the table for him.
But a jury did find him guilty in December 2011, handing him life in prison without parole plus an extra 14 to 19 years.
Section 6, an enduring legacy. Eve's impact lives on. Now, we are absolutely not ending this explainer on the darkness of the crime. Let's look at how Eve's light is still shining.
Eve always believed she can make the world just a little bit better, right? And through these enduring tributes, she is literally still helping students today. UNC established the Eve Carson Scholarship, which has spent nearly 2 decades funding summer experiences and senior year tuition for students. They also created the Eve Marie Carson Garden on campus, this beautiful, calming sanctuary for reflection and peace. And, maybe most touchingly, the campus still comes together every single year to celebrate her birthday, making sure her spirit of inclusion and service never fades.
So I'll leave you with this. How will you choose to leave your mark on the world? Take a second to reflect on Eve Carson's incredible promise. She achieved a staggering amount of good in just 22 years. It really makes you ask yourself how you can carry a bit of her grace and dedication forward in your own life. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I hope Eve's legacy inspires you just as much as it inspires the thousands of students still walking in her footsteps today.